set back in the AV room back there? All righty. All right, I'd like to bring the Town of Wappimger Zoning Board of Appeals meeting to order. Can I have roll call, please, B?
Here. Yes, here. Here.
Here. All right. First order of business this evening would be the acceptance of the minutes from November 22nd, 2022. Everybody had a chance to review?
Yes.
Any comments, questions, changes? All right. Can I have a motion then to accept the minutes as written?
Make a motion.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. So moved. All right, next order of business tonight is adjourned public hearing, appeal number 227765, Samuel V. Dawson, seeking an area variance section 24037 of the district regulations in an R15 zoning district, where 30 feet to the rear property line is required. The applicant provide 3.4 feet for the legalization of a freestanding 20 by 20 deck, thus requesting a variance of 26.6 feet. The property is located at 8 Kretsch Circle and is identified as tax grid number 6155014827749 in the town of Wappimger. Could I have a motion, please, to open the adjourned public hearing?
Make a motion to open.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right. There's Mr. Dawson. Please step to the microphone. Good. Again, for the benefit of the board and the public and anybody listening in, just a quick description of what you need and why you need it.
Sure. This deck was constructed by me without a permit. I'm in the process of applying for a permit. The last hearing on November 22nd, with my drawings, I applied for the application and a variance because it was not as per what may be required. At that time, in November 22nd, the board asked me about the rear property line or a survey map. Since no survey map is available anywhere, it was suggested to me that some kind of a survey can be done to establish the veracity of that line. And in fact, following that, the board did conduct a on-site visit to inspect it. And there were some of the dimensions I had presented in my drawing initially were apparently inaccurate. So it would have been the best to get a professional survey done, which I did. And I submitted the survey map to the department. So, and the request for variance has changed slightly compared to my original applications because there was a slight difference in the rear property line.
The dimensions, correct?
So my request is there now for your reconsideration.
Got it. Okay, so we were at the property a few weeks ago, right? And we saw your deck and what you got going on and the proximity of the deck to the rear property line. Again, it was important for us as well as you to get that dimension correct. It is, understanding that variance you're looking for now is quite substantial, because you're pretty tight up close to that property line. In viewing this again, and if the guys have any other questions too, it's a substantial variance, and I appreciate you going out and getting a survey and making it accurate. However, I feel again that if the guys have any other questions, that it's a very large variance that you're asking for. I think I would request, and then the guys would weigh in a bit as well, that now the footings that you have under the deck, are they every 4 feet? Are they 4 feet spread apart? I remember you had a schematic, but
yes.
I don't have it in front of me.
Yes.
It's about 4 feet, right?
Yes.
The rows are 4 feet. Oh, here we go. This dimension is really the one. Let's see, we're looking this way, right?
That's
Right. We have that first first row of footings is, it's kind of difficult to see, right? What we're debating on doing is just to lessen the variance a bit, and we would consider, you know, approving if you would go along with that. But we're trying to figure out what would be the least painful way for you to do that. And I think this is the, I'm looking at this right, guys? And this was the steps, correct? All right, here we go. And that first row of footings would appear to be about 46 inches, right?
Yeah.
46 inches. So what we would consider doing is that he would have, instead of, you know, we don't want to have you move the entire deck, right? And because that would be asking, I think, a little too much. However, we would be considered, again, the guys could weigh in, if you were to remove the deck, that one row of footings, basically lessening your variance by approximately 4 feet, as opposed to, you know, what you actually would really need there. Yeah, even at that, you're quite substantial, but is that something you would consider doing?
I have no option, no choice.
Again, the guys, you know, if you have any other questions or any suggestions for the applicant, you know, we could do that. I think, you know, to just to basically just lessen that variance a bit, you know. I think I would request that. You guys have any other suggestions?
I think I have same feeling that 80–90% is big variance to ask for. Even with 4 feet, it will be still 75% or so, but at least better than 90%. So I think if you are willing to do that, we can vote on it and move on. Because right now it's all done, but it's not.
Okay.
Right, yeah. I don't have any suggestion.
I mean, David, if you have any.
Yeah, I mean, the only other option I could even think of, if I was in your position, would be, because you have a lot of footings, like if you were to remove the entire deck, like it would be a nightmare to remove all those footings. If you did masonry, you know, if it was concrete, oddly, you wouldn't need the variance. It would be hardscape then, and you would be able to leave the footings in place.
Or you make the
It
entire.
might
They
be
are in
more
concrete.
expensive.
The footings are in concrete.
Yeah, but if you did you'd have to do
Basically
a
a slab.
small retaining wall, you filled it with dirt, and left the footings where they were. I mean, that would be an option for you. I don't know if it's a great option.
Yeah, what is suggesting is removing the whole deck and that area doing a landscape with stone or cement. So, but still.
Oh, you mean remove the deck and do a hardscape? Or as is?
It would be an option for you if you didn't want to, if you wanted it basically where it is, but you didn't want to have to remove all the footings. It's not a great option.
Yes, not a good option,
Yeah,
but the option.
it'd be quite an expense.
But it's the only other option I would be able to think of outside of what's being recommended.
Okay, I guess I'll have to try and work the first row, like you suggested.
You understand, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
explain the row closest to the fence, obviously, you know, bring it
up.
closer. All right, so that being the case, is there any other comments, questions from the board? You know, any other comments from the audience or the public on this application? Okay, then I will make a motion then to close the public hearing. Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moved. So the public hearing is closed. So I am going to make a motion to approve the variance with the stipulation, right, that you will be removing 4 feet of deck on the rear of the deck. So now somebody's going to have to do some math for me. So it lessens your variance, right? So now if we remove 4 feet, then you will be 7.4 feet from the rear property line. And thus then your variance needed, B, you might have to double check me, but I think it's going to be 22.6 feet.
It goes back to about the original variance he was asking for.
Gotcha. And it's close to
It's
that.
just about
right?
almost there.
Close to that. Is that right, B?
Is it an additional
4
4 feet?
feet. He'll be able to provide 7.4 feet.
22.6.
Okay. So your variance then is 22.6. So I am going to make a motion to approve the variance. However, you'll need to remove the 4 feet from the rear of the deck. That will provide then 7.4 feet from your property line to your deck. Thus, then you will need a 22.6-foot variance. So now, I believe that your benefit then cannot be achieved by any other feasible means. Does not pose an undesirable change to the neighborhood. The request is substantial. However, that in and of itself is not enough for me to deny it. There's no adverse effects to the environment, and the difficulty is self-created. However, I will make a motion to approve the variance as stipulated. Can I have a roll call, please, B?
Second.
Mr. Loizia?
I think he's
No,
second.
second.
Say, I'm sorry. Motion, you have a second and roll call.
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Valadi?
Yes. Okay, so your variance is approved as stipulated.
Thank you,
Okay,
Jim.
thank you. And thank you for the survey. Okay, next item on the agenda, public hearing, appeal number 227771, area variance, Ronald A. Westner, seeking an area variance of section 24037 of district regulations in an R20 zoning district where 40 feet to the rear yard property line is required. The applicant can provide 20 feet for the construction of a 30-foot by 30-foot detached garage, thus requesting a variance of 20 feet. Where no accessory structure can have a footprint greater than 600 square feet, nor a height in excess of 20 feet, the applicant is proposing to construct a 30-foot by 30-foot detached garage, thus requesting a variance of 300 square feet. The property is located at 9 Sylvia Drive and is identified as tax grid number 6257-02-756-777 in the town of Wappimger. Could I have a motion, please, open the public hearing?
Motion open public
Could I have
hearing.
a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Mr. Westner,
Yes, sir.
for the benefit of the board and anybody else listening in, just a brief description of what you need and why you need it.
Okay, Ron Westner, 9 Sylvia Drive, Buckner Falls, looking to build a 30 by 30 garage, detached. I think upon our site visit, we were initially thinking that we might need the 20-foot variance, but I think we figured that we could reduce that and provide the 30-foot.
Correct.
And then instead of the 24 by 24, I wanted to build the 30 by 30 just to get that little bit of extra space. So I'm requesting the, what was it, 300 square foot.
So then, the size or the footprint of the garage is not changing. That's, you're still requesting the 30 by 30.
Right.
But what we discussed when we were actually all did the site visit, right? We were looking at, you had a fair amount of distance from that, right? From where you proposed to put the garage to your rear property line.
Right.
So instead of going for such a large variance, we asked you that, instead of doing the 20 feet, go, 30 feet from the property line, which would lessen the variance, right? So we're going to be, tonight's math night, B. What we suggested to Mr. Westner was that, instead of going for setting the back of his garage 20 foot off the property line, setting it 30 foot off the property line.
Well,
So-
it sounds like it's actually about 38, right? We're just
Yeah, I
giving you some
think-
extra just in case.
35
We
to
were
38
leaving too much of a buffer,
Yeah.
so we had to narrow it down.
Right, so that's, 30-foot was correct, right?
That's what we
Right.
discussed as an
About
option,
30
if
foot.
it was acceptable, yeah.
So if he were to place his garage 30 feet off the property line, then he would need a 10-foot variance versus a 20-foot.
Are you still getting the 30 by 30?
Correct. The size stays the same. So, right, so guys, if my math is correct, anybody,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That was it. So we asked you to do that since you pretty much had a, fair amount of distance there. So in doing that, it reduces the variance that you're requesting.
10 foot.
Right, exactly. So he'll need 10 foot as opposed to 20. I'll wrap this up in a bow in a minute, B. Okay, so the footprint was the other issue. So the footprint was a 30 by 30, so you need a 300 square foot variance for that, for the footprint. Got it. We were out there, we see what you got, see your property, the way it's all laid out, how you want to put this out, and you staked everything out for us. I don't have any other questions for Mr. Westner, unless you guys do. Any questions or issues? Yeah. Does anybody in the audience have any questions regarding this application? Appear to be not. So then I will make a motion then to close the public hearing. And could I have a second?
Second?
Again, all in favor?
Aye.
And so moved. Could I have a motion then, please, to deny or grant the applicant the variance with the stipulations set forth that we are going to be moving or reducing his variance by 10 feet?
Make a motion to grant the variance based upon the stipulations of it being 30 feet instead of 20. Benefit can be achieved by no other means. There's no undesirable change to the neighborhood. The request is no longer substantial. There's no adverse physical or environmental effect, and it is self-created.
We gotta do the same for the footprint, Dave.
Oh, same for the footprint. Motion to approve. It can be achieved by no other feasible means, no undesirable change. Request is verging on substantial, but I'd say it's not there yet. There's no adverse physical or environmental effect, and it is self-created.
All right, could I have a second?
I'll second.
And we could have a roll call, B, but when you do the roll call, I would say approve both, state both variances when you approve, okay? So we have a second by John, and then can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Lawrence Zimmer?
Yes to both.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes to both.
Yes to both.
Yes to both. Okay, so your variance is approved with a slight modification.
Thank you very much.
You're free to go. Okay. Next up on the agenda tonight is a public hearing, appeal number 217738, area variance, Neil Ryan Lasser, seeking an area variance section 24030 and 24037 of district regulations in an R40/80 zoning district, where no more than 2 accessory buildings shall be permitted in any one-family resident district. The applicant is proposing 3 accessory buildings, where no accessory building shall have a footprint greater than 1,200 square feet, nor a height in excess of 20 feet. The applicant is proposing to construct a 4,160 square foot pole barn, including a, 12-foot lean-to with heat and electric for storage of a tractor and farm equipment. The pole barn would be 40 by 80 square feet with a 12-foot by 80-foot lean-to. Therefore, the applicant is seeking a 2,960 square foot variance. The property is located at 41 Didale Road and is identified as tax grid number 635903274-312 in the town of Wappimger. Now, it's my understanding that the applicant wanted to postpone the public hearing. Right, so we should, we need a motion to adjourn. So we would need a motion then to adjourn this
Well, just
public.
see if anybody from the public is here on it.
Or do we? we officially open the public hearing?
I guess you could, yeah.
Okay, so can I have a motion then to open up the public hearing?
Motion to open public hearing.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Is there anybody in the audience that want to speak on behalf of this application? Okay, so there is not. So then we would need a motion then, Jim, just to adjourn.
Correct.
Right? Can I have a motion, please, to adjourn this public hearing to the January 10th meeting?
Motion to adjourn the public hearing to January 10th.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay. Next on the agenda. B, discussion. Appeal number 2273, area variance, Cesar Barzalo, seeking an variance, hopefully I got that right, that's right. Seeking an area variance, section 24037 of district regulations in an R20 zoning district, where 35 feet to the front yard property line is required. The applicant can provide 19.1 feet for a house renovation, thus requesting a variance of 15.9 feet. The property is located at 15 Spook Hill Road and is identified as tax grid number 625701003924 in the town of Wappimger. Anybody here to represent this application? How are you?
Hi, good evening.
Good. Just for your name and address, please, for the record.
Sure. My name is Edwin Rodriguez, and I'm representing Cesar Barzalo for 15 Spook Hill in Wappimger Falls.
Gotcha. Okay, for other board's benefit, anybody listening in, just a brief description of what you need and why you need it.
Sure. So what we're looking to do, the main structure of the house, currently it has an irregular shape, meaning on the sides it kind of goes inward like an L, and we kind of want to make it a regular shape, pretty much squaring off the front of the property. Why we're doing it, I guess for aesthetic reasons, it just looks better for me to have kind of a regular shape for the home, to match also the garage that's also being done at the property.
Got ya. So this, 1 second. So there's no footprint issue here, it's just straight up.
Do you have a site plan that shows the existing condition, the proposed? Or did anybody get one? I did not.
It's just an intro,
Oh, okay.
so outside, it's not,
So I have floor plans, but this is what you're proposing, doesn't show what was there.
it was just presentation.
Can't show very much.
Existing wall.
So let's see what's existing and what's.
Looks like this is a new
Would
one.
you, on this plan, would you be able to show us what's existing and what's proposed?
So on the survey portion, it should say, can I? Yeah, so this is the main dwelling right now. That's the 19.1 that's existing right now.
Right.
This is technically like an L inward here, and also, you can kind of see it there, this is the chimney that's going to be removed, but we're trying to square pretty much this whole section off, because right now this is an L indented, and this is indented as well.
So the current house is slightly closer to the road than
The current house is here or here? Current.
So the house already, so the main part,
Yeah.
I can probably show you a picture.
Okay.
Visuals are easier. So this is the main house, right? Over here, there's like an L. See it goes like an L this way inward.
Yes, right.
And then this chimney is going to be removed, so this essentially is just going to be all
Flat.
flat.
So that chimney is this bump out roughly
Correct.
here?
That's the chimney here, and then on the left side is where it's like an L. So essentially, we just want to.
So this is the new roof line here?
Correct, yeah, that's what.
And then this is the porch?
Correct.
So the proposed is almost the same or a little bit less than what's there now? In terms
Or
of,
same.
Closer to distance.
it looks like the chimney's closer to the road than what you're proposing.
Well, no, it's going to go.
Yes, right.
There's the deck. There's a page that has the. I think it's actually less.
Yeah, right. Or same or less.
It looks like the same or less,
Right,
yeah.
yes, right. So by going chimney away, is less.
But essentially, that was the map that we did. I think it's probably in the front. But the porch picture.
This is the energy code, and you have this existing floor plan.
So existing, you will tell us anything?
Essentially,
Not really, right. No, this
it's
is,
harder to see it.
yes, right.
But essentially, yeah, I mean, that's the.
Essentially, we squared it off.
I think chimney getting removed and is going back like 1 foot or so.
I-
So overall will be less than.
Yeah, so the main structure is staying the same, but the deck is going to be a little bit forward. Like, that's the difference.
Oh,
I think
so-
on the application. I
Okay,
put
so
it.
the deck is going to be what we're
Bumped up a
measuring
little
to, and
bit.
that's a little bit closer.
Correct, and then that's going to be
Yeah.
like the whole square.
So when we make the site visit, you guys can give us where the deck is at the front.
There is no deck right now.
No.
But you can
Yeah.
post it, right?
Yes, yeah, I can
You give us a marker where it's going to be.
As a part B to our discussion tonight is going to be, we're going to set up a site visit, to come and look at the home. And when we go there, it'll be south. We'll get a date in a minute. What we'll do is we would like you to do is to outline where that porch is. You can put a couple stakes in the ground, line it out, whatever it is, whatever's easier, just so we can see, what the proximity of that's going to be to the
Road.
So we're going to arrange a site visit. It'll be January 7th is a Saturday. We'll be there probably around 9 o'clock.
Wrote it all down for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. And then after we do the site visit, well, this evening, we'll schedule your public hearing as well. We'll schedule that for the following meeting, which would probably be the 10th again, right? So we're going to schedule a public hearing for January 10th. We'll schedule a site visit for the 7th, and we'll be there about 9 o'clock. Okay? And B has a sign for you. You're going to need to post that sign in the front yard.
Okay.
All righty. You're good. All right. Next up on the agenda this evening is discussion, appeal number 227772, area variance, Alpine Commons, multifamily workforce housing, seeking an area variance, sections 24037 and 24081.7 of district regulations in an SC zoning district where a maximum of 93 dwelling units is allowed. The applicant is proposing 144 dwelling units, thus requesting a variance for an increase in the density for mixed uses to allow for 51 additional dwelling units to be constructed, where 2.5 stories or 35 feet maximum building height is allowed. The applicant is requesting an increase to 3.5 stories or 50 feet, a 50-foot building height, thus requesting a variance of 1 story and or 15 feet building height. Where 282 parking spaces is required for 144 dwelling units, the applicant is requesting a decrease in required parking spaces to 238 parking spaces, thus requesting a variance of 44 less parking spaces. The property is located at 1404 Route 9 and is identified as tax grid number 615702707773 in the town of Wappimger. Is there anybody here this evening representing the applicant?
I am here. Neil is not here. He is running a little late. He should be here in about 5 minutes. Is there a chance we could take a 5-minute break until he got here? Would that be okay?
What do you think?
Unless you want to just get started, I mean.
Is there?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a quick overview of the
Yeah.
project.
Sure.
I'd just rather not get into the details.
No, I mean.
Yeah, that's fine.
As far as just the overall overview of the project.
Sure.
Not
I can
some of the other issues, which is more in Neil's wheelhouse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So just for the record, your name, please.
My name is Brian Donato. I'm with Dakota Partners, the applicant.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Just a quick overview.
Sure.
So Dakota Partners is proposing to build 144 multifamily apartments at the Alpine Commons Shopping Center. The apartments are intended to be built essentially up above BJ's in the back vacant land. I think our proposed site is about 8 or 9 acres total. Site disturbance is under 7, I believe. And we've kind of been through a bit of a process with the town board, and we've decided to take the route of asking for the area variances from the ZBA. And we've just a little bit of background on Dakota. Dakota is has worked pretty extensively in New England. About 2 years ago, we brought on a team. I'm based out of Ithaca, New York, and we have a couple other people out of New York to grow our portfolio in the New York market. This is actually one of the first projects we started working on when we came into the market.
Gotcha. Just buzzing through. I'm going to take a quick overview myself. So how many buildings in total, are you proposing?
The total is, there is, I want to make sure I'm counting here right. It's 5 residential buildings. So the buildings are either 24 or 36 units, the residential buildings, and then there is a small clubhouse. It's about 2,500 square feet. The buildings are a combination of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms.
So it's five buildings,
5 plus
dwelling
1.
units, right?
Correct. Yep.
And maintenance shop and everything is not separate?
I'm sorry.
Any work, a maintenance shop, store?
Yeah, there'll be in the clubhouse is
In the
Piece.
leasing space, a community room, a kitchenette, fitness center, and then there is maintenance space.
part of it.
Excuse me.
So, I guess a couple of questions regarding the variances for building height. Because I know, and that's one of the things that kind of I'd have to look at our code to see exactly, I'll have them kind of have a discussion, but one of the things that becomes technical with respect to building height, particularly in an application like this where you have sloping ground, you may have a part of the building that doesn't need a variance and a part of the building that does.
Right. So if I...
Sure.
Just to, I believe that if the code, if I remember correctly, is basically like mean ground height at the front of the building. So if you look at some of the elevations, and I think we included in the packet, a typical building and then the worst case building, that's why the as outlined in Neil's cover letter, the differences are from, I think, as low as like 42 feet or 43 feet all the way up to almost 50 feet. And that's just has to do with the fact that the buildings step down to meet the terrain.
Yeah, it's always a little bit of a, no pun intended, slippery slope, right?
Yeah.
Where did that mean building height from?
So we did have the architect provide those based on, what he felt was his interpretation of the code.
Got it. These are all rental units, correct?
That's correct. They're all rental.
And workforce housing, is that?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So one of the question, I don't know you can answer now or not. The rent, proposed rent at the beginning, like $600, $632 for one bedroom?
Yeah, so the rent, the rent that currently is proposed, and I will just emphasize that this project is being funded by New York State Homes and Community Renewal, so we won't know the final rent ranges until we actually go through their process, but currently the rents for the one bedrooms are between $1,285 and $1,897. The two bedrooms are between $1,518 and $2,276, and the three bedrooms are between $1,753 and $2,630.
That's the market. The one which you are proposing is not that, right? The one which you are accounting in this note, which is 623 to 1889.
Sorry, where are you seeing that?
In this,
It's page 3 of the letter.
yeah, page 2 or 3. The second page, I believe, in this package. Maybe page 3. Yeah, page 3 is identified as.
All right, yeah.
Anticipated that rents will range from $632 to $1,889 per month.
That may have been a mistake. I was just actually reading off of the presentation I had done to the town board a while back.
Oh, okay.
So, like I said, though, there is...
So if you could explain the process, because it's a range,
Yeah.
and it's based on the income of the applicant.
It's based on the income of the applicant, and so ultimately, as I mentioned, we get funding through New York State Homes and Community Renewal, so they'll provide probably 95% of the funding, either through loan programs that they have or through the sale of tax credits. And because of the sale of tax credits, we need to income restrict the units. The income restrictions can be as low as 20% of AMI all the way up to, we could potentially go up to 120% of AMI.
And AMI for the board is?
Area median income, which is, boy. Brendan, do you remember what it is? Okay. For it's Dutchess County.
Right.
That's where they move it from. So, we have a proposal right now that, we put together. Ultimately, we have to get through the approval process before New York State Homes and Community Renewal really starts to pay a lot of attention to it. So, we have a range that we think makes sense based on our market studies and our research. But that's going to be one, subject to time. Obviously, the area median incomes come out on an annual basis, so as they change, we have to adjust rents appropriately. And it's going to also be based on the programs that are available when we actually get to the point where we're finally ready to close for funding. So depending on the agency comes out with new programs every year, so that may skew our targeting one way or the other. But in general, we're trying to target this between 60 and 90%, and we may have to do some units that are lower than that. But I would say, in general, the vast majority of them we're trying to get in the 60 to 90%. We think that's kind of a sweet spot from the market that's out there, from the financing of the project, and weighing all those factors to it.
Gotcha.
One question regarding that. So is that restriction limited to the life of the financing, or is that tied to the property itself?
So it is a deed restriction that does have a term for it. It's typically, for these projects, it's 30 years. The reality is, I'll tell everybody, it's pretty much forever. You get to 25 or 30 years through this, or 20 years, and you need to do rehabs, and HCR is going to want you to come back and use their money to do a rehab. So, and as part of that, you obviously extend the use of it.
Gotcha.
That's okay. I was playing Neil.
Just made it.
Sorry, folks, move fast.
Anyways, I'm going to turn it over to Neil. Obviously, I'm more than willing to answer any questions, but I want to let Neil kind of go through the technical aspect.
So, just regarding the building height definition, so the definition in 240-5 for building height, it says, the greatest vertical distance measured from the adjoining finished grade at the front of a building to the highest point of the roof, if the roof is flat, or to the mean level between the eaves and the highest point of the roof, if the roof is of any other type.
That's where the mean came in.
Right. So if it's a flat roof, it's measured to the top of the roof. If it's a slanted roof, it's to the mean level between the eaves and the highest point. So I guess it would be the ridge typically. I don't know if you had dormers, whether you'd include that or not. And it would be the...
Well, typically your dormers would probably be a little lower than your ridge. Right?
Yeah, well, that's true.
So
it's probably, so it would be...
It's like a bell tower. That's what you're thinking.
Bell towers typically are not included in our definition of height. There is an exception for bell tower. I know that. So, and I don't think they have any anyway.
Bell towers?
Yeah, not on the...
Good.
So it's the...
All right, so, for the record, your name, please?
Yes, my name is Neil Alexander. I'm a partner at the law firm of Cuddy & Cater. Here on behalf of Dakota. Brian introduced himself. I'm a little embarrassed, and Brendan also. B's entry on the agenda set forth the variances. I can talk a little bit to, it sounds like Brian talked a fair amount to the project. And this is new for me that this is here. So is there a way to actually put up the drawings? Which, I didn't bring a flash drive, so that's what that's how this is. Okay. If not, we can just, what I can do is just talk you through it, and inauspicious start and all. We'll go there. So this is Alpine Commons. Many of you drove past it on Route 9 on the way here. The property was acquired by Diamond Properties about 3 years ago, going on 4. AC Moore and Stop and Shop proceeded, Salvation Army all vacated it. BJ's is still there, sitting in the back, doing well. You saw, and I think you approved last month, a sign variance for the Fun Adventures and Fun Max.
Furniture store.
Furniture store.
Right, go in as it's about 65,000 square feet of the AC Moore building, and there's also a furniture store going into the other part of that building. The property overall is 86 acres. And so what has become possible is the notion of moving forward with a mixed-use project here. As you know, we're sitting there right on Route 9. We have a signalized intersection right at the front of the property. There are 2 right-hand turns in from the south. There are 2 left-hand turns in from the north. It's a great opportunity to redevelop a gray field. We took a look at the code. There is a mixed-use provision. We're in the SC zone. There are only actually 3 properties in the entirety of the town of Wappimger that are classified in the SC zone. There's this property, there's the Hannaford property, essentially almost a 1/10 of a mile to the north, and there's a tiny other property elsewhere that I can never remember. And
DeGarmo Road.
Thank you. Jim always does that for me, thank God.
Myers Corner.
And so of the, let's say, roughly 126 acres, roughly, in the town that are zoned, in this zone, we represent, obviously, the polarity at 86 acres. What Dakota's looking to do is 144 units of multifamily housing. That'll be in the course of 5 buildings. Some of the buildings are 24 unit, some of the buildings are 36 unit. There's also a small, approximately 2,500 square foot clubhouse, and that it has a fitness center, a kitchenette, for a community room, and offices for a community manager and leasing agent. So this use is permitted by special permit and site plan. Why are we here in front of you is there really the most significant elements of the project are within your purview and without which we can't go forward. So interestingly enough, in the town of Wappimger, whether you're a residential use or you're a commercial use, the height limit is 35 feet, regardless. And in fact, every district in the town, other than the RMF 5 and the RMF 3, limits you to 2.5 stories. It's kind of hard to do multifamily at any level as part of a mixed use at that level, at that height. You heard sort of the nuances of why the numbers measuring with a range, and we have an undulating site. So we think we got our math measurements right. We don't claim to be perfect on that, but we think we got all the math measurements right. And that is why we're looking for both a stories variance and a height variance. Again, key to this, and we can sort of dig down into the drawings in a couple of minutes, or right now, or if you already have. It's a big site, and we're deep into the site, far back from all the setbacks. And also, as you know, from Route 9, we have a huge grade change. So we don't believe any of the neighborhoods, whether, Lucy is all the way on the other side of BJ's. So we don't believe that there's any real visibility by going this extra height on an undulating site. We've also asked for a parking variance. Your code is a little bit older, and I think it could probably stand for a complete refresh on parking. It's a little bit, let's just say that there are cities that are going to 0 for multifamily right now, and there's a lot of places with downtowns that are going to 1 or under. The ITE is actually at 0.99, and what we're proposing is 1.65. Here, with our mix of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms, what it really comes down to, just from a vernacular standpoint, is we have 1 parking space for every 1-bedroom unit, and we have 2 parking spaces for every 2 or 3-bedroom unit. Another way of looking at that is also we have 1.5 parking spaces for every unit, plus 10% set aside for visitors, so to speak. So there's a lot of parking, and that's just on our acreage of the site. If you think of it, we have a huge shopping center that's way overparked, as we all know. It's a little bit of a walk and that's why we didn't go any further down in our variance request. But as you know, you come up the hill, you're going to come through the site, and with BJ's sort of in full front of you, you're going to make a right-hand turn into our site. If you looked at this, if you had a chance to look at the site plan, and there's plenty of parking there, literally at that alley that we're creating, where if you had a tertiary car, let's say, for whatever reason, you could walk in to the property and take advantage of that. As we all know, there's a lot of parking there. There's even a remote lot as you come up the hill on the right that never has a car in it, you know, as you know. The third variance gets a little wonky. And it's a little bit math heavy. So actually, I'm going to grab the code. It has to do with density calculation. And the real good news is all we're asking tonight, by the way, is that you just circulate notice of your intent to be lead agency under seeker. So we'll get a couple more bites at the apple on the math here. I believe I did the math right. So if you look at 240-81.7 on mixed uses in the code, what it says is you're allowed to do your residential density. You're allowed 3 dwellings units per acre of net lot area devoted to the residential component of the mixed use. So this is really where it gets interesting. So there are only 3 places in the entire town of Wappimger code where they use the formula of net lot area instead of gross lot area. RMF 5, RMF 3, and mixed use. So essentially, what happens is you deduct out certain environmentally sensitive areas, although it actually doesn't prohibit you from actually building on them. We're not building on them either, but in order to calculate your density, they actually say, well, you have to take out, and I can look up the precise definition again, but it's essentially, you know, floodplains, wetlands, and extreme slopes. So by doing that, you know, you're doing that, they're deducting that to set density regardless of whether development is proposed within those areas. So it's a little bit weird because if you think about like a cluster subdivision, you would just say, oh, I'm not going to build on those areas, but I can use that area to calculate how many houses I get for a return. So immediately here, the net lot area formula drops our net lot area to 47.3 acres. It reduces the density for calculation of our property by 45.5%, which in of itself we believe is a hardship. If you compared that to the fact that if we just stayed completely commercial on this property, we would be entitled to 1.135 million square feet of commercial development. We have 209,000 out there right now, so we'd be allowed another 900,000 square feet. But the 146,000 approximately square feet of residential we have needs a variance.
So, do we have a diagram that shows that breakdown at all?
You have a write-up in my. I'm on page about 4 of my letter, where I laid it out. I think I did okay. I mean, it's wonky. I'll fully admit it, and we can get deeper into that. So the other aspect of this density provision is it doesn't want you to double dip. So, which is kind of odd in my own estimation, because if you're encouraging mixed use, you should be encouraging density. But what it says is that the residential and commercial components of the mixed use shall not individually or in combination exceed the maximum density standards for the residential or the commercial, and you can't have more than, you have to have at least 25% residential and at least 25% commercial. And if I click my heels, sorry. But it's tough, and I'm being sort of jocular because it's dense. So when I went through it, what I figured out was that I took our net lot area, which I had said to you was that 47.3 acres. I took the fact that we have 209,000 square feet of commercial out there pursuant to an FAR of 0.3. I backed that math into the fact that 16 acres of that 47.3 acres needed to then be allocated for the existing commercial development that's out there. What that left me with was a remainder of 31.3 acres that could be used towards the RMF 3 calculation for residential under subsection A1. You multiply that 31.3 acres times 3, you get 93.3. Rounding downward, I'm sorry, 93.9, I misspoke. You round that down to 93 multifamily units, and we're asking for 144 multifamily units. So that's how you get to the proposed versus the allowed. Now, as to why, as I said, I thought that there was a really odd situation here. So I thought it was interesting to note, as I already said, that huge discrepancy if we stayed completely commercial, which there's no market for, obviously. I also noticed that if the code didn't use the net lot area formula, but actually used the gross lot area formula like it does everywhere else for a commercial use, we would be compliant. We wouldn't need a variance. I also noted that if you used the net lot area formula, but this was used RMF 5 instead of RMF 3 for mixed use, we would be compliant. So ultimately, what I then said is, while these things are very interesting, right, let's go back to the comprehensive plan. And what's the goal of your code? And your comprehensive plan from 2010 has a recommendation to encourage higher commercial density in mixed commercial land use in existing commercial areas that support transit, reduce traffic, improve local identity, provide opportunities for public spaces, and promote pedestrian activities. Clearly, making this mixed use here makes us someplace you travel to, not travel through. And having people on this property 24/7 and living there creates a hive of activity that isn't commercial. It also helps the other commercial all within a mile, north and south, thrive. I think it also goes without saying, the housing needs assessment from April of 2009. There's also the March 2022 Dutchess County Housing Need Assessment really talks to the need for interventions in the town and in the region, in the area, and I think everyone knows that housing is incredibly scarce. And on a more happy note, having this housing here also gives an opportunity for the town of Wappimger to, as the IBM $20 billion investment over the next 10 years unfolds from Poughkeepsie, it gives you in a position to, as they bring in employees for that, to get those employees living here on the workforce level. So that's sort of the basis of how we believe the code is working a hardship on mixed use in particular. And also, if you look at the test and so forth, there's always the unwritten test, which is the precedent, and that's why I also talked to the fact that this is really one of only 2 properties that really would be truly able to take advantage of mixed use in the town. So that's sort of an introduction to all of it. I'm sure there's a lot for you to digest and to think about, but which is why, really as far as all we're looking for tonight is for you to circulate notice of intent to be lead agency. We did see that the county sent a letter to you all, which, they said it was a matter of local concern, which I think is great, especially since, they have their road there. So they're, I think there's implicit support in there for housing by dint of that. Sorry, I know that's a lot.
So there's quite a bit to digest, right? I mean, you guys were looking at this for 3 years, right, or maybe more. So there definitely is a lot of information for this board to digest, not only considering the variances, but all the math that you went through. I mean, that's quite a handful. I'll put it that way, right? Quite a handful. I know, of course, we're going to have, I'm sure, a series of discussions, as we go along, as far as circulating for a lead agency. Jim, is that something that the board actually needs to vote on?
Yeah, so let me just talk a little bit about that. The other issue, is there an escrow posted, Neil? Do we know?
I think there was a prior escrow.
Okay.
Will we post an escrow for this application?
We called out when the escrow
Okay.
posted.
Okay.
Thank you for correcting.
All right, so there was that. So that was one bit of housekeeping. The other one is, so, in that context, the planner isn't here tonight, but, we will loop the planner in on this. I went over some of the part one. I should say I went over the part one. As far as lead agents, involved agencies, I would just add New York State DOT because they've got control over the intersection.
Okay.
And I think that's got DEC, got DHCR, got the planning board. So those would be the involved agencies.
Sorry, so did you say New York State Homes?
It's on the list.
Yeah.
Already, so it's on here. I was just adding DOT. And then so the disturbance is about 7 acres? Okay. And then I guess we can refer it again to county planning. County planning already got it, but in the context of seeker review. One of the other things so the board had, a question regarding, being lead agency, and what I had explained to the board was, typically the planning board would be lead agency, but right now you don't have an application pending before the planning board. So they can't be lead agency since they don't have an application. And, what was discussed is basically, the project more or less falls on this application should it be denied. I think, it's not going to go forward. With respect to that, I think what might be helpful to the board would be a potential layout for density if you did not require a variance. And what would that look like?
A residential variance.
The mixed-use variance.
Okay.
If you did it, straight on R3, I understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I'm sorry. I don't understand. I apologize.
So if you did it, I guess if you did a layout of the 93.
Oh, 93. Okay. Yes. Okay.
And then I think if you do, because you're looking for a height variance, if you would do a visual EAF.
Okay.
We could probably circle back with the planner and come up with a couple of spots
Yep.
I don't know if you guys want to make some suggestions as to what they might be.
Yeah, I don't think there are any, I mean, I'm thinking collaboratively here, I don't think there are any receptors anywhere nearby.
Yeah, about the only, I mean, probably not, the only, usual, like, the only thing, and I don't even, like, the best views in the town of stuff is on All Angels around the Cider Mill Loop water tank.
So, you know, we can, if it's okay with everyone, we'll gladly talk with you and Malcolm and get some input as to where to go.
I mean, I've never driven into town and consciously seen that site. I don't know if anybody's had that experience. I mean, I don't, like, you know, usually when you do a visual EAF, right, you're looking at it from, so when you're doing a visual EAF, you'd be looking at it from a park, historic site, someplace of natural beauty. You know, most of the sites, you know, if you were looking at it from Messier Homestead or somewhere along the river, you're not going to see it. I just don't,
We're not near the Taconic, we're not near Stony Kill, we're not near Chelsea Church.
I mean, you're not, I mean, there's really, like I said, and I think there's a scenic overlook pull-off on All Angels at the top there.
When we go down slope, right.
And you can just look out, that's about,
okay.
And I know you can see, like, Mount Alvernia. I know, like, driving along that stretch, you can see out to Mount Alvernia, but I've never really looked at, you know, that site. An equivalent to this application would be the Riverbend property it's actually technically in the village on the north side of Myers Corners. That development there, right opposite the intersection with Losey and Myers. Mm-hmm. And that apartment, they were all 4 stories. The code had permitted 3 stories, and they went to 4. And the reason why they did that is they put garages under the first story on all the levels. But, you know, there was a lot of reluctance to grant the variance at the time, but if you go through there, it doesn't really look that out of place. But, you know, that's the type of, and you know, you don't, from a far off view, you don't really necessarily notice it. I don't know if it's because of the context of Hannaford's and everything else, but it doesn't really jump out at you. I mean, and again, to the north of that property, you've got Imperial Gardens and some other larger buildings, but again, there's a lot of terrain masking here, but for purposes of a height variance, I think, you know, visuals for the height, I don't know if you want to do like a cross-section of, you know, like the surrounding area with the heights just to see, because I think you're correct, there's going to be a lot of terrain masking.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe...
Yeah, I think we can play with the definitions of what's the above mean sea level versus the above grade level.
I mean,
a sense of overall top height, because there is some undulating there where, as you know, at the rear, there's a water tank behind BJ's.
Yes.
So I think we can get, we'll play with it. We
We do a lot of training back there.
Yeah.
Fire department.
Yeah. So I think I definitely hear what you're saying.
So,
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure the
it might
best way
just
to
be
do it,
easy
but we'll
to
play with
do,
that.
you might want to just take a cut through the site,
Oh, that's a good idea too, yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
put the topography in there and see, and then, you know, take it out for a little bit and just put in the topo, and then, you know, that's usually a good kind of factor of seeing how much, you know, what the terrain, because obviously anything that's below that isn't going to be seen if it's masked by the terrain. So, but there's, like I said, there's a couple of higher elevations to the east of the site.
Okay.
But it's pretty wooded, and whether you see it or not, I don't know.
Okay.
So for the matter of circulating, right?
What's that?
For actually, question, as for the matter of circulating for lead agency, you know, we had talked a little bit about, how does a coordinated review work into that?
Okay, so the applicant, Neil and I had actually had discussed this. So the applicant has two options, or actually the lead agency has two options, as does the applicant, with respect to coordinated and uncoordinated review. Uncoordinated review would mean every approving agency would conduct their own secret review for the application. In a coordinated review, an agency establishes itself as the lead agency, circulates to the involved agency, and asks them for their expertise regarding the particular areas. In this case, it is pretty complicated. So, like if DHCR, Housing and Community Renewal, is listed as an involved agency, and you know they would submit some input as part of the SEQA process. And as an involved agency, they're bound by the determination of the lead agency, whether it's a negative declaration or you go to a positive declaration and require the preparation of an environmental impact statement. But one of the things that is very helpful in a coordinated review is you're getting these agencies to submit input to this project because, in essence, it's part of their review process. The state agencies, DEC, DHCR, the county agencies, like the health department, you know, they typically, their review is really kind of more ministerial. They're looking at one very, very narrow focus of the project. Similar to what we're doing here. I mean, we're really just looking at the variance issues. But again, as we've discussed, one of the things that the Zoning Board of Appeal is required to do as part of approving a variance is to make a determination as to how does it affect the environment, which is exactly what the secret review process is. So you're, in essence, killing two birds with one stone. When you're doing the secret review, you're also looking at that prong of the area variance test. How does it affect the environment? You know, the language is a little bit different, but, and then you character the community, which is again part of seeker. So all of those factors that you look at as part of granting it or reviewing and approving or denying an area variance are included within the seeker process. So you're really not doing extraneous work. You're just doing it in a more formalized process with other agencies specifically looking at those issues. You know, normally, if you know you weren't conducting a secret review and you just had, say, a straight variance where you were looking at setbacks and there was no secret review, you know, you wouldn't have the benefit of looking at or getting input from, you know, DEC on a particular wetlands issue or something like that. So, I mean, all of the issues here, you know, you're going to have wetlands issues, but most, in this particular site, the wetlands are really...
Yeah, we're not nowhere near the wetlands.
The wetlands are on the opposite side of the...
That's why I think, if I may, Jim, I think we felt coming to you all made the most sense, because it's really, this application really is about getting a variance for the parking standard and about getting a height variance, which, as Jim was saying, giving you a handle on the visual and the density, right? And whereas more traditional planning notions, I already have a signalized intersection at my front door. So there's no real traffic discussion to have. There's nothing more that can be done down there. You know, we're going to go to DOT, and the worst thing that could happen really is DOT sort of saying, well, I don't want to give you any more free time into the intersection than this, at which point, well, we're only going to be able to get 4 or 5 cars out per cycle, but that's only hurting us. They're going to keep the free flow on 9 where they're happy with it. They prioritize 9, and they're going to keep the signaling and the patterning and the timing prioritized to 9, and all we're going to wind up doing is finding out we're either going to get enough cars through or we're not going to get enough cars through, at which point we're going to have a little bit of a queue, which Diamond is experienced at other properties that are controlled by DOT where it has a little bit more of a queue than it would love to have, especially when, in that case, there's a gym that empties out for classes and everyone's trying to get home and they have a problem, there from a user standpoint, but the roadway has no problem. So the usual factors of like site plan, those aren't really the drivers here. Really, it's the variances that are the drivers of this project becoming mixed use instead of straight commercial, and that's why we came to you all. That's why we think also it's important for you all to be engaging in a coordinated review with you as the lead agency, because it would work a hardship on the whole process to everybody, candidly, if another agency were the lead, because we'd work through seeker with that party, but then we'd come here to first figure out where we're going on a sense on the variances, whereas we should be really in front of you working through seeker piece and variances simultaneously. They're interconnected, right? As Jim was talking about, if you look at the latter prongs of the area variance test, as far as substantiality, as far as community character effect, as far as environmental impact. So there's a lot of overlap, and I think, what seeker's most concerned about is, are the issues identified? Is there a hard look taken at them? And is there a written reasoned elaboration? That process will occur, with you all while we work through with the variances, as well as, and in our opinion, better, because of the fact that the most salient and significant aspect of getting through the entitlement process here are the variances. They're the driver, and that's why we came here.
Yeah, understood. And the logic, understood.
I understand it deviates from some of the things you've seen before, but I think it really does make a lot of good common sense, and it safeguards the process not only for the town but also for the applicant.
So, Jim, so then going forward, do we need to memorialize that in some fashion?
So you would just, it would be a motion to authorize circulation for lead agency to the agencies that are listed. The way that works is there's a 30-day, they have 30 days to respond. If somebody doesn't respond in 30 days, they're deemed to have consented. Pretty much, I think most of the bodies would consent to you being lead agency.
What about the coordinated review part of that? What about the coordinated review part of that?
So the coordinated, so basically the only issue with coordinated review, really, is that the outside agencies besides you have skin in the game. Because the determination of the lead agency is then binding on the other agencies. So if you did an uncoordinated review, then what would happen is you would look at all of those issues basically on your own. Whereas if you do it as a coordinated review, DEC will comment probably with respect to, now I guess, that was one question was, the speedies you're noting is for
stormwater.
Stormwater.
It's the general permit, yeah.
Okay, so that was, so, they would comment on issues. Oh, I guess the other one that I don't see on here is SHPO. I don't think SHPO's got anything, but you just will circulate the SHPO.
Yeah, there was no, I think we may have done a 1A already.
Okay.
We'll take a look at that.
Okay. So,
SHPO, yeah.
So if we want to make a motion to circulate lead agency, do we need to clearly state that we would want a coordinated review as well?
yes, actually that's what a motion, to circulate, if you did not do coordinated review, there would be no circulation for lead agency.
Exactly.
Okay, if you were going to do uncoordinated review, you're just the lead agency, and those people are what are called interested agencies. And they basically they're not bound to comment. If you do coordinated review, you circulate to them, you say, hey, we have this project before us, It's going to come to you at some point in time, and we are acting upfront as the lead agency, and we want your comments on the application. So the circulation for lead agency, by definition, is
It's a coordinated review.
So if you did uncoordinated review, there would be no circulation.
Oh,
You know,
So if we did uncoordinated, we just review it based upon these 3 items? That they're
well, what
asking
you would
us?
do is you would ask in essence, you would ask the applicant for all the information that we're currently asking for, the visual studies, the traffic studies, the parking studies, what birds and, the environmental, endangered species studies, all of that type of stuff. So you would do that, but you would review it and not really necessarily comment on it as well. What happens in a coordinated review is DEC, Fish and Wildlife, would review it and give you comments back on it.
Yeah.
So DOT is gonna, New York State DOT would comment.
Once
back.
you have
But they would eventually comment anyways, though, right?
Not in a coordinated review.
So what DEC has said sort of is that once there's more than one agency and there's several agencies involved, they like to have a lead agency and they coordinated to serve sort of as an ombudsman. Because what happens also is it's just an inefficient process at that point, right? You have several people who would potentially be reviewing the same materials, and there's the potential for coming to different results based on identical information. And I think from a fairness, from an applicant standpoint, but also from a consistency of agency determinations, they are looking to have one party sort of take on. So the lead agency by definition is the interested agency leading the seeker process. And so basically they're asking someone to come forward. So very often when you'll see a lack of clarity on it, you'll see sometimes DEC or DOT getting in arguments as to who's going to do it with each other. But here I think it's very clear, right? There's as to why you all should be that. And I think, basically all you're doing is you're saying, I'd like to. You're circulating notice that you'd like to, and if no one objects, then you will be. And if someone did object, there's a whole DEC process of how that's adjudicated that has nothing to do with figuring it out in town hall.
Okay, so.
Sorry,
to move this.
making
It's okay.
the complicated
No,
more
that was very, no, it's a good, we appreciate the description
So.
and the explanation.
Actually, just for a totally offhand comment, because of the nature of a review of variances and the obligations of the zoning board, it's very different than a planning board. A planning board doesn't have as much discretion as the zoning board of appeals does. The zoning board of appeals typically sits as a quasi-judicial body, making determinations, what your ultimate goal is, or what your ultimate power is in your legislative intent, is to look at the code and in essence fill in the gaps. And the way you fill in the gaps to alleviate hardships or things of that nature is to look at the overall intent of the code and then look at the application and see, does it affect other properties? Is it consistent with zoning as a whole? Is it create any adverse environmental effects? Is it consistent with the character? Those are all things that the zoning board does. Planning board doesn't do that. What the planning board basically does is, I get a subdivision application, I want to do a 10-lot subdivision in a 1-acre district, and it's 11 acres of property. You go in, you say, okay, you've got 1-acre lots, you meet the setbacks, you have roads or don't have roads, you have drainage. You don't look at those kind of, as the planning board, they just basically, what they do is they look at the code, they look at the application and say, does it fit the application? What a zoning board of appeals says is, well, it's here because it doesn't really fit the code. So we look at other areas besides the code. What the planning board does is they just look at the code. And if it doesn't fit the code, sorry, either your application's denied or you gotta go to the zoning board of appeals and work it out. So that's kind of what the secret process is. At the end of the day, the secret process, even if you went to the environmental impact statement, so the first step in the secret process is make a determination. Will it have a significant adverse environmental impact on the environment? You either say no or you say yes. If you say yes, then it's POSDEC and you create an environmental impact statement. If you say no, then you go forward and you make your determinations regarding what the variance says. But even if you say there's a potential for a significant environmental impact, you then do an environmental impact statement. And at the end of the environmental impact statement process, you then have to make a determination to weigh whether the benefit of the application, the benefit to the applicant, outweighs the harm to the environment, which is exactly what the determination you're making when you're granting a variance. So at the end of the day, the secret process is very, very similar to what you do as a zoning board of appeals when you're, reviewing an application. So it's just, I know it's a lot more paperwork, but
a lot more information than we're generally used to get.
But by the same token, though, you'd probably, even if secret didn't exist, if the statute didn't exist and we were just looking at this in the contents of granting an area variance for these things, all of this type of information would be collected. So here we're just, in essence, in the coordinated review, looking at the other, asking the other agencies for help to assist us in doing it.
So one other question. So it seems like you could, as of right, build 93 dwelling units, right?
Yep.
Which is about 182 parking spaces.
Yep.
And you could build at, what, 2.5 stories?
Correct.
At basically the size building you're already showing. So it seems like everything they're asking isn't essentially any worse for the site in any way, right? Because they could do as of right much, a little bit greater, pavement, a little bit, greater unit size even than what they're asking for. I mean, is it worth just trying to limit our review and not involve some of these other agencies?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, because they basically, they've made the application, but, and that's something, within your power. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I said, show us what you're allowed as a right and, tell us why that doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm for involving the other agencies and getting their input. Or I mean, that being the case, then the next step would, the way I understand it, make a motion to circulate for lead agency. So officially, we'll make a motion to circulate for lead agency. You have a second?
I will second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you.
So then, did we
So I think
schedule
if we
any
put
further
this out,
meetings with you at this point, or no?
let's say that again.
Do we schedule any other meetings with the applicant at this point?
I would
No.
think we would probably schedule something out sometime, probably a February date.
Yeah, I think that probably makes sense. I think it would be great if we could get a memo maybe from Malcolm in the meantime, or
Okay.
you, just telling us on the visual study, because
Sure.
right now there are no leaves on the trees.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
And
that's,
they will branch out in the early spring, and if we,
yeah. So,
not that I want to be standing outside taking photos tonight.
maybe the second
Well,
meeting in February?
there's a meeting on the 14th and the 28th.
28?
Yeah, why don't we do 28th?
28th?
That's great, as long as we can have, and the board understands we can have access to Jim and Malcolm to work through whatever their issues are in the intervening time. That's fine by us, and then we can come in with a much, more detailed and thoughtful answers to the questions we're posing.
Sure, so we'll schedule another discussion meeting for the February 28th.
Yeah, discussion's perfect.
And then, in the interim, I'll circulate to the board the seeker handbook. I don't know if you've seen it before. And it's some light reading. Yeah. But it's actually, it's very well written. And it's not,
That's good.
it's not as dense as, it's not as dense, and I never say that about, it's the first time I've ever said anything about a DEC document being well written. I've never said that before. But it
Must be the holiday season.
No, it's not.
You're
It's
feeling joyous.
it is, but it's a good resource, and then there's some flow charts separately that supplement the process. So
maybe there won't be some.
it sounds a lot more daunting than it is, because it's just a big project. I mean, if you had a bigger, I'm trying to think of the last big project that we had a variance on.
I don't want to mention it.
Yeah, okay, different issue.
They've been River Bend, is it called?
I think traffic
May have been
supply
that.
had a variance too.
That's not as big.
No,
I mean,
no.
you
No.
guys know about cell towers,
Yeah, we had. All right.
I'm going to swing away on that.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but it's the same type of studies, just kind of different, but.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
My
You're welcome.
apologies again. You moved through your agenda very quickly.
We try.
Brian did a tremendous job in your staff.
Yeah. All right. So if there's no further business this evening,
Anybody from,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Just before we adjourn?
Have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
anybody from audience has any comment?
It's not public. Yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
So move, we are adjourned. Thank you.
It's mine or yours?